Hello and welcome to Before You Pull, where we will show off the kits and details of upcoming characters, as well as some recommended teams and disc setups to help you plan your pulls. All of the following is from the creator server, so things are still subject to change. This time though, we're going over Soldier Anby, the S-rank version of the face of the game. As always, I am not your father. I can't tell you who to roll for, but hopefully after this, you'll be better informed to help you plan your own pulls. Soldier Anby is of course an S-rank attacker, but she makes use of a brand new mechanic called aftershock attacks. But don't worry, she can also deal plenty of regular attacks too, dishing out loads of damage all the while. Not only does she have very high personal DPS, but she also buffs the entire team's aftershock attacks too. Just as a quick explanation, aftershock attacks are essentially the new term for when characters use an attack while off field. And at the moment, we only have Anby, Pulchra, and then eventually Trigger who will have these attacks. But here's the catch with Anby. She can trigger her own aftershock attacks while she is still on field. You see, when Anby attacks an enemy, they become marked with the silver star. And then, as she continues attacking them, a gauge is built up that has 3 stages. Each third of the gauge is considered as one stack of white thunder. For each third of the gauge that is filled, or for each white thunder stack, it lets you know that you can tap to use Anby's regular special skill. No energy required, to do a very quick dash through the enemy, consuming that section of the gauge and dealing a burst of damage. But what's more is that doing this will also trigger an extra aftershock attack. And if that wasn't enough, after you do this 3 times to the same enemy, a bonus lightning strike will hit the enemy and all others in range too. This extra strike also is considered an aftershock attack. So in a nutshell, your main goal with Anby is to build up that silver star gauge with attacks, then use her special attack to consume these marks and deal a whole bunch of aftershock damage. And then you rinse and repeat. Now, any damage that you do will build up this gauge. Doing a full basic attack string will fill up about half of the gauge. But if you hold down her EX special, Soldier Anby will do a burst of damage, but also she will completely charge the silver star gauge, letting you immediately follow up with 3 special attacks. To of course trigger 3 additional aftershocks, and then also the bonus lightning strike aftershock attack too. And then after that, you can go ahead and use Anby's ultimate, which of course deals a huge amount of damage by itself, but then also refills up the silver star gauge again, letting you do it all over. So as you can probably tell, Anby really likes aftershocks. But as an attacker, this time around instead of a stunner, she also loves crit damage, and to prove it, let's look at her core passive, which is pretty busted when it comes to personal damage. Firstly, at rank F, the max rank, any enemy that has a silver star mark on them, so basically any enemy that you attack, Anby will just straight up deal 25% more damage to them, for free. But what's more is that against these marked enemies, for Anby's aftershock attacks, when they land a critical hit, the damage is further increased by 30% of Anby's total crit damage. So what that means is, let's say you have 150% crit damage. Your aftershock crits, now instead of doing the 150%, it will deal 195%. Since 30% of 150 is an additional 45% crit damage for the aftershock attack specifically. This just gets better and better the more crit damage that you have on Anby. And then as for her team passive, which requires a stun or support agent in the team, which is going to be very easy to do, Soldier Anby just gets a free 10% crit rate. And furthermore, when Anby is the active character, all squad members' aftershock damage against marked enemies is increased by 25%. This of course includes Anby herself. So not only is Anby's own damage going through the roof with all of these aftershock buffs, but she can also enable the rest of the team to contribute more damage too from their aftershocks. Now on the topic of teams, let's go over who you can run alongside Anby. And I think to address the elephant in the room, yes, right now, Pulchra is the only other agent with aftershocks available until Trigger arrives in 3 weeks time. If you want to get the most out of Anby's team passive, ideally you would want 2 other aftershock agents on the team. So for example, Anby, Trigger and Pulchra would be great. You can have Anby constantly dish out damage to the enemy, while the other 2 not only do their own thing, building up a stun with their offset attacks, but now those attacks will also be contributing a decent amount of damage too. All this being said though, Anby is still perfectly fine even if the other 2 agents aren't aftershock users. As the team passive implies, pairing Anby with a stunner and support is greatly recommended. Having a support provide a big attack boost lets Anby capitalize on her huge crit damage multipliers, and if you then combine that with the increased damage multiplier an enemy gets once they are stunned, Anby will be able to do so much damage. In a team, Anby's core gameplay is, as I mentioned, pretty straightforward. Attack the enemy to charge up the silver star gauge, then use her special attacks to consume the marks for extra damage, rinse and repeat using her EX special and ultimate as necessary. But as for Anby's personal build, let's start off with her discs. Of course, the new 4-piece Shadow Harmony was literally made for her, increasing aftershock damage by 15% and then granting her up to 12% attack and crit rate too. And then as for the 2-piece set, ideally you would want Branch and Blade for even more crit damage, but if you're still lacking in the crit rate department, you can also opt for Woodpecker Electro. For the main stats, slot 6 is going to be attack, slot 5 is your choice of attack or electric damage, and then slot 4 is also crit damage or crit rate, depending on what you need more at the time. Ideally, you want as much crit damage as possible while still having enough crit rate to actually be able to land those hits. Next up, Anby's signature engine really leans into the whole crit damage aspect of her. The Severed Innocence engine not only provides 48% crit damage at max level, for the base refinement effect, it gives another 30% crit damage for free. But after you use a basic attack, special attack, or aftershock attack, which you're going to be doing very often with Soldier Anby, she will gain a buff where each stack increases crit damage by a further 10%, totaling 108% crit damage all from one single engine. And what's more is that when you have all three of these stacks, she also gets a bonus 20% electric damage. Now, as strong as this engine does sound, do not worry, as it is by no means mandatory to make Anby usable. There are always alternatives, like for example the S-rank Brimstone, which complements Anby's non-stop usage of attacks while being on field, or the event engine Marcato Desire, which provides some crit rate as well as some extra attack to let you focus a bit more on the crit damage when it comes to her discs. But for those of you going for Anby's Mindscapes, of course they make her even stronger than ever. Starting with her first Mindscape, it buffs Soldier Anby's EX special so that when used, it triggers the White Thunder aftershock attack 3 times for free, without actually consuming any stacks. So basically, when you use the EX special, it triggers the 3 regular aftershocks, and because of that, the extra lightning strike too, and all of this is done for free, and you still come out with a full gauge to trigger another 3 White Thunder attacks as you normally would. Mindscape 2 is a huge spike though for Anby. Firstly, she gets free 12% crit rate, because why not? Secondly, when using her ultimate, she gains 6 stacks of a buff called Thunder's Cry. And with this buff, whenever you would use her special attack to consume a charge of White Thunder, a stack of Thunder's Cry is used instead. So essentially, immediately after using her ultimate, you can get 9 special attacks off in a row, triggering 9 White Thunder aftershocks and then 3 lightning strike aftershocks as well. Do all of this while an enemy is stunned for the big damage multiplier and they are not surviving. Mindscape 4 simply lets Anby ignore 12% of the target's electric resistance, and then Mindscape 6 states that after triggering 6 White Thunder aftershocks, you now also get an additional vortex that deals 1000% of Soldier Anby's attack as electric damage. And this attack is also considered an aftershock, so it can also take advantage of all of the aftershock buffs that we've been talking about. In summary, Soldier Anby is of course incredibly strong when it comes to her own personal damage, especially with all of those aftershocks, but she can also improve the whole team when used with 2 other aftershock users. It is understandable though if you are concerned, since the only 2 other aftershock users in the game right now are Pulchra, who is an A rank that might not do that much damage, and then Trigger, another limited S rank agent right after Anby's banner. But I'm sure that this new aftershock mechanic will be something that we will be seeing a lot more in the future agents to come as well. So Anby can definitely look to buff not just Trigger and Pulchra, but anybody else in the future. But in saying that though, Anby is also perfectly fine even without any other aftershock users in the team, thanks to how high her personal damage is by herself. Her playstyle is incredibly fast-paced and flashy, so if you're into that, Anby is definitely your go-to girl. Otherwise though, thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, liking, commenting and subscribing is greatly appreciated, and it'll also help keep you notified for when I live stream my own personal Anby pulls once her banner is up. But until next time though, bye bye!